As dusk gradually descends, the city appears like a painting blending beauty and coldness. The flickering streetlights illuminate the bustling streets, where people hurry by, each immersed in their own world. The sounds of car horns, hurried footsteps, and fragmented conversations create a busy yet distant atmosphere. Amid all the hustle and bustle, no one noticed a small figure standing quietly at the street corner, Isaiah. The boy, with his dark, weathered skin and emaciated frame, looked like a forgotten part of the city. His tired eyes reflected a sadness and endurance that seemed too great for a child. His hand tightly grasped a piece of cardboard, the only thing he could call a bed. The cardboard, frayed and stained, is the companion that keeps him company through the cold and lonely nights. Isaiah grew up on these streets, where kindness is as rare as a luxury dream. Day after day, he faced the gnawing hunger in his stomach and the contemptuous looks from passers-by. For him, receiving a little food or a few coins out of the pity of strangers had become a stroke of luck. But over the years, the hope within him has gradually faded. He no longer expected any help, just trying to survive each day, a long, endless day like any other. Isaiah understands his position in this society. He is a part of the darkness, almost invisible in the eyes of everyone. But no matter how harsh life may be, he still stands there, quietly watching the world move, embracing a familiar loneliness. On the crowded street, Isaiah stood silently, his eyes constantly following the hurried faces that passed by. Each person seemed busy, as if no one noticed him or deliberately ignored his presence. But then, amidst the bustling crowd, he noticed a well-dressed woman approaching. Her long, flowing dress shimmered under the streetlights, and the sparkling rings on her fingers made her stand out in the crowd. Her high heels clicked softly with each step on the sidewalk, producing a steady sound. For a moment, Isaiah hesitated. He knew that people like her usually didn't stop to listen to a boy like him. But the urge from the torment of hunger left him with no other choice. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to step forward. "Ma'am, please?" His voice was gentle and hoarse from calling out all day. "Just a few coins or a little food. I haven't eaten anything for days." The woman stopped, her eyes fixed directly on Isaiah. For a moment, hope flickered within him, but immediately after, her gaze turned cold and full of contempt. She stepped back, as if his mere presence had tainted the air around her. "Don't touch me," she almost shouted, her lips tightly pressed in disgust. "This coat is worth more than your entire life." The cold words cut into Isaiah's fragile pride like a knife. He bowed his head, his shoulders trembling slightly, but still trying to hold his ground, his small hand still outstretched, though it had begun to shake. "Please, ma'am," he whispered, his voice almost choked. "I can work, wash cars, clean, anything. Just something to eat." But your sincere pleas did not change the woman's expression. Instead, she gave a faint smile, a brief laugh full of disdain. "Work? Look at you, filthy, definitely full of lice. You only know how to beg and steal, nothing more, nothing less." Her laughter echoed in Isaiah's mind, each word she spoke pushing him deeper into the abyss of self-doubt. The crowd began to pay attention. Some people stopped, curiously watching. A few phones were pulled out, starting to record. Isaiah felt all those gazes fixated on him, like invisible daggers piercing through his frail body. His stomach growled with hunger, but he didn't want to succumb to this contempt. He swallowed his humiliation, raised his head, and looked straight into her eyes. "You don't know anything about me?" he said, his voice trembling but containing a strange courage. "You don't know what I've been through." The woman frowned, but her gaze remained unchanged, still cold and indifferent. Isaiah's words did not move her. On the contrary, she merely smirked, her gaze sliding over him like he was an insignificant object. "Kids like you always make excuses. Just keep saying you're suffering, but in the end, you only end up stealing or joining some criminal gangs." She turned away, walking hurriedly, as if wanting to distance herself from his image as quickly as possible. Isaiah stood there, his shoulders slumped in disappointment. Her words echoed in his mind, each one adding to the burden on his small shoulders. But even though his hands trembled, even though his voice choked, he still wouldn't let himself cry. Not here. Not in front of the curious eyes staring at him. When the woman disappeared into the crowd, Isaiah took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. Life on the streets had taught him that he couldn't expect kindness from anyone. And this was just another testament to that. But deep down, the pain she caused was not just hunger or humiliation. It was the feeling of being completely discarded, as if he didn't deserve to exist in this world. As the crowd grew larger, whispers spread like ocean waves. All eyes were fixed on Isaiah and the wealthy woman. Her insults not only left a wound in Isaiah's heart, but also made the atmosphere tense and uncomfortable. A few people standing nearby showed sympathy, but most just looked at him with curious or indifferent eyes. In that moment, a deep, calm voice rose up, breaking the enveloping chaos. Enough. The crowd quickly turned their attention to the man who had just spoken. He stepped out from the crowd, his tall stature and elegant attire making him stand out naturally. With a calm demeanor yet exuding an air of authority, he approached Isaiah and the wealthy woman, his sharp gaze seeming to pierce through all pretense. "No one has the right to treat this boy like that," the man said, his voice clear but not harsh. His gaze at the woman was not one of anger, but of deep disappointment. The woman momentarily paused, her face flushed with embarrassment as she realized she had become the unwanted center of attention. "I just wanted to teach it a lesson," she awkwardly justified, but her tone clearly lacked confidence. The man ignored her explanation and instead knelt down to Isaiah's eye level. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his eyes full of understanding. Isaiah didn't answer immediately, still too stunned by the stranger's unexpected appearance. But in his eyes, the boy saw something he had never received from anyone, genuine concern. I'm fine," Isaiah replied, his voice trembling but sincere. The man nodded slightly, then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded bill. He gently placed it into Isaiah's hand, his large hand holding the boy's small, trembling hand for a moment. "Use it to buy something to eat," he said, his voice not only carrying compassion, but also affirming that Isaiah deserved help. Isaiah looked up at the bill in his hand. That was an amount of money greater than anything he had ever dreamed of. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words of thanks got stuck in his throat as tears welled up. He just nodded slightly, clutching the bill as if it were a treasure. The man stood up, his gaze once again turning to the wealthy woman. "Today you have shown everyone who you really are," he said, his voice calm but sharp as a knife. The woman did not respond, only bowed her head and quietly left, trying to escape the judgmental gazes around her. The crowd also began to disperse, but the atmosphere remained heavy due to the recent events. Before turning to leave, the man placed his hand on Isaiah's shoulder, his eyes full of encouragement. "Take care of yourself, okay?" he said, a warm smile appearing on his face. When the man left, Isaiah stood there, feeling as if everything around him had changed. For a moment, he no longer felt invisible. The kindness from that stranger, though simple, ignited a small spark of hope within him. Something he thought he would never find. As Simon's figure gradually disappeared into the crowd, Isaiah remained standing still, his hands tightly gripping the bill. The cold wind swept through, but he didn't pay attention, as his mind was cluttered with thoughts. He had never met anyone like Simon before. Someone who not only stopped, but truly saw him, listened to him, and was willing to help without expecting anything in return. At first, he felt confused. That kindness felt like something too extravagant, too unfamiliar in a life where he was used to coldness and indifference. Why is he helping me? Isaiah wondered. He couldn't understand Simon's actions. In the past, when he reached out for help, what he usually received were only disdainful looks or hurried footsteps passing by. But this time, a stranger actually stopped, not only to help, but to do so with genuine kindness. Gradually, the feeling of confusion within him transformed into something else, a small but strong glimmer of hope that made him tremble. It was the first time in many years that he felt he was not completely worthless. He was not just the street kid, as everyone called him. Simon, with his simple actions, made him realize that he deserves to be seen and treated as a human being. Isaiah looked down at the bill in his hand, his eyes misty but not shedding tears. He felt a quiet change within himself. It was not just gratitude towards Simon, but also an awakening that perhaps life was not just a series of hopeless struggles for survival. A small ray of light had penetrated the dense darkness in his soul, awakening a thought he had once deemed distant. I can do something too. I can change. When Isaiah left the corner, his footsteps were somewhat unusual. They were no longer heavy and sluggish like before, but seemed lighter, as if an invisible force was supporting him. He didn't know what awaited him ahead, but for the first time, he felt there was a reason to move forward, to hope and to try, even if just a little, day by day. Isaiah met Tasha on a chilly morning, as he was wandering through familiar alleys in search of shelter. The girl appeared unexpectedly from the shadows, with a sharp gaze as if she could read the thoughts of the person opposite her. Tasha is only a little older than Isaiah, but her experience is evident in her gestures and way of speaking. The tattered coat wrapped around her small frame, but it couldn't hide her vigilant and strong demeanor. "Are you new here?" Tasha asked, her tone cold, but not entirely distant. Isaiah nodded, somewhat cautiously. "I've been living here for a while." "No, I mean you just got out on the street, right? Don't know how to live here yet." Tasha raised an eyebrow, then broke into a faint smile. "You won't last long if you keep wandering around like that." Tasha quickly became an unofficial guide for Isaiah. She took him through all the nooks and crannies of the city, showing him safe places to rest, thus the corners where the police or gangs usually didn't appear. She taught him how to detect danger from afar and how to avoid being robbed. "Never hold on to anything valuable for too long," Tasha said, glancing at the bill that Isaiah had been clutching tightly since yesterday. "You need to hide it. People don't care who you are. If you have something they need, they'll take it. No need to ask." Isaiah listened intently, each of Tasha's lessons like a matter of survival. She even showed him how to choose places that sell cheap food, where the vendors are not too scrutinizing. But Tasha didn't just stop at teaching him how to survive. She also frequently reminded him of the harshness of the street world. "Once you're here, you have to learn how to hide," Tasha said in a serious tone. "No one wants to see someone like us. The more you attract attention, the more trouble you'll get into." The first encounter between Isaiah and a practical lesson took place shortly thereafter. He, still feeling a bit of confidence from Simon's kindness, decided to use the money he had given to buy a loaf of bread at the bakery he had passed by many times. The bakery looked very clean, with fragrant pastry counters and warm light streaming through the window panes. Standing in front of the door, he felt his hesitation, but hunger drove him to take a step forward. But before he could step in, Tasha appeared out of nowhere and pulled him back. "Are you crazy?" the girl whispered, her eyes full of worry. "You can't go in there." "Why not? I have money," Isaiah protested, holding up the bill as proof. Tasha sighed, her eyes full of sympathy, but also mixed with helplessness. "It's not about money, Isaiah. People like us, filthy, ragged, just stepping in there, and they'll call the police. You are not welcome in places like that." Isaiah felt a wave of shame rising in his heart, but he still didn't fully understand. "But I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to buy food." "That's what you don't understand," Tasha said, her voice becoming softer. "You don't need to do anything wrong. Our presence is already the reason for them to drive us away. Tasha's words, though bitter, were the first lesson Isaiah had to learn about surviving on the streets. This world is not fair, and to survive, you need to accept that reality. But inside him, a quiet resistance was also beginning to form, a belief that things shouldn't be this way. Isaiah bowed his head, hiding his shame, and followed Tasha out of the bakery. He understood that he still had much to learn, but he also knew that he was no longer alone. Tasha, with all her toughness and experience, had become the companion he never expected, a guide on this harsh survival journey. One afternoon, while wandering through the busier than usual neighborhood, Isaiah unexpectedly spotted a familiar figure. It was Simon, the man who had once helped him, stepping out of a large building with a weary appearance. His neatly tailored suit could not hide the haggard and tense look clearly visible on his face. Isaiah hesitated. He had thought a lot about Simon since their last meeting, but he never expected to see him again in this situation. Gathering all his courage, he stepped forward and called softly, "Mr. Simon?" Simon stopped, turned his head towards Isaiah. His gaze showed surprise, but quickly turned into a faint smile, albeit slightly dim. "Isaiah?" he said, his tone calm, yet still carrying a familiar warmth. "I don't think I'll see you again," Isaiah admitted, a bit embarrassed. "Are you okay? You don't look well." Simon sighed, as if the weight of the whole world was on his shoulders. After a moment of silence, he gestured for Isaiah to follow him. They found a nearby park bench to sit on, away from the noise of the city. "Kid," Simon began, his voice dropping as if carrying the weight of fatigue, "I'm very glad to see that you're still okay. But I must confess, my life right now is not easy at all." Isaiah looked at him intently, said nothing, waiting for Simon to continue. Simon leaned back, his gaze absent-mindedly directed towards the sky, but his expression gradually became serious. "There is someone named Amelia," he said, his voice slightly hesitant, as if weighing each word. "She is my estate manager, and she used to be someone I trusted very much. But recently, I realized she is not the person I thought she was." Isaiah tilted his head, puzzled but didn't dare interrupt. "Amelia has secretly taken control of all my assets, from the company to personal investments. She used her connections to build a network of power, and now I have almost no control over my own life. Every time I try to confront her, she either evades the issue or shifts the blame onto someone else." Simon's voice was filled with disappointment and helplessness, something Isaiah had never seen in him before. "I suspect that she is plotting to seize all of my assets, and if that happens, we will lose everything." Isaiah listened with deep empathy. He didn't understand much about wealth or power, but he knew what it felt like to be trapped in a no-way-out situation. "Do you have anyone to help?" he asked, his voice soft but full of concern. Simon gently shook his head. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Isaiah. Amelia was someone I once thought would protect me, but now she has become the greatest threat. Every day, I feel like I'm being watched, being controlled. But we don't have clear evidence to go against her." Hearing this, Isaiah felt something rise within him. He remembered how Simon had treated him kindly, and he knew that he could not stand by and do nothing. "Mr. Simon," he said, his eyes shining with determination, "if you need help, I will do anything I can." Simon looked at him, his face showing a hint of surprise but also mixed with a light, appreciative smile. "You don't owe me anything, Isaiah," he replied, his voice warm. "But if you really want to help, I won't refuse." Both sat quietly on the bench, each carrying their own thoughts in their hearts. For Isaiah, he knew that this could be an opportunity to repay Simon, the only one who had brought him a glimmer of hope in his darkest days. And for Simon, Isaiah's appearance was a reminder that no matter how harsh life may be, there are still people willing to stand by his side. The bond between these two seemingly unrelated individuals has now become a glimmer of light amidst the darkness of schemes and betrayal. After hearing Simon share about the difficulties he is facing, Isaiah couldn't stop thinking about his words all night. The image of Simon, once radiating strength and calmness, now trapped and helpless, made him unable to sit still. For Isaiah, Simon's kindness not only saved him from a dark day, but also brought him new hope. And now he feels he needs to do something to repay that kindness. The next morning, Isaiah sought out Tasha, his always cautious and wise friend, to share his intentions. Tasha was sitting on an old step, her gaze absent-mindedly watching the crowd pass by, when Isaiah appeared with a look of determination. "Tasha?" he called, his voice clear but also a bit hesitant. "I need your help." Tasha raised an eyebrow and turned to look at Isaiah. "Help? What is it this time? What are you planning to do with that big bill? Or are you planning to take a risk at another bakery?" The girl teased him half jokingly, half seriously. "Not that." Isaiah sat down beside him, his gaze more serious than ever. "I met Simon again. He's in big trouble." Tasha listened as Isaiah recounted what Simon had shared about Amelia, the plot to seize the property, and Simon's helplessness when he had no one to trust. When the story ended, Tasha fell silent, her eyes clearly showing skepticism. "And what do you plan to do?" Tasha asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. "We're just kids living on the streets." "How do you think you can help someone like Simon against such a powerful woman?" Isaiah clenched his fist, his gaze unwavering. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't just sit still. He helped me when no one else cared about me. Without him, I would have nothing. I have to try." Tasha looked at him for a long time, her gaze gradually softening. "You really are serious, aren't you?" She sighed, her tone now less cold. "But Isaiah, this is more dangerous than you think. She is not the kind of person we can confront without a clear plan." "I know," Isaiah replied, his voice becoming firm, "but you always know how to see opportunities that others don't." "You're smart, Tasha. If we join forces, we can do it." Isaiah's words made Tasha ponder. Even though she always told herself to live selfishly to protect herself, looking into Isaiah's determined eyes, she found it hard to refuse. Moreover, Simon, the man Isaiah wants to help, is also a rare character in Tasha's eyes, a good person in a cold world. "All right," Tasha said after a moment of silence, "but if we do this, we have to do it very smartly. Don't be reckless, and don't let her find out." Isaiah broke into a relieved smile, as if he had just been re-energized. "Thank you, Tasha. We will make it." Both of them started making plans. Tasha took on the task of gathering information about Amelia, tracking her habits, and investigating her relationships. Isaiah, with an optimistic spirit, sought to approach Simon to exchange more details and uncover any weaknesses Amelia might have overlooked. Although there are still many challenges ahead, Isaiah knows that he is no longer alone. With Tasha's help, he felt that they had a real chance to do something meaningful, not just for Simon, but also to prove that even the smallest people can make a difference in an unjust world. After many days of planning, Isaiah and Tasha began to follow Amelia. They chose the secluded street corners where they could observe without drawing attention. Tasha, with her sharp instincts and street experience, is the leader. "Be patient," she reminded Isaiah when he seemed impatient. "Every misstep could expose us." Over the course of several days, they recorded Amelia's schedule. She frequently appeared at luxurious places, expensive cafes, law offices, and sometimes meetings with powerful men. But what is most noteworthy is that Amelia often carries stacks of documents, sometimes even whispering something full of secrets when meeting her partners. One evening, while following her into an upscale restaurant, Tasha and Isaiah overheard a furtive conversation between Amelia and a middle-aged man. She spoke softly, but enough for them to catch a few key words. "Transfer the assets within this week. Cannot let Simon suspect." That statement made Isaiah and Tasha feel the pressure increase. "We don't have much time left," Isaiah said, the tension evident in his voice. "We have to act now." After observing for long enough, Tasha and Isaiah decided that Amelia's mansion was where she kept the most important documents. Tasha, with her excellent memory, sketched a simple diagram based on the times they had observed her coming and going. They planned to sneak in when Amelia left to attend a party. That night, Isaiah and Tasha stealthily entered the estate grounds through the side gate where few people passed by. Isaiah's heart raced as he climbed over the tall wall. Inside, the vast garden of the mansion emerged in the dim light, exuding a magnificent yet terrifying beauty. Tasha led the way, each step as light as a wild cat. They found an entrance through a small window on the ground floor. Inside, the mansion was quiet, with only the ticking of the large clock echoing in the vast space. "Follow me," Tasha whispered, leading Isaiah to the study they had anticipated. Amelia's office is elaborately decorated, but what catches their attention is the large wooden desk, on which there is a stack of documents. Tasha quickly checked the drawers, while Isaiah carefully opened the file. Inside were documents detailing Simon's asset transfer plan, illegal transactions, and even evidence of her bribing some influential figures. "Here it is," Isaiah whispered, his voice trembling with excitement and fear. He used his phone to take pictures of each page, while Tasha stood guard near the door. They were finishing up when suddenly they heard footsteps from the hallway. "Someone is approaching." Isaiah and Tasha exchanged panicked glances. "We have to leave immediately," Tasha whispered urgently, pulling Isaiah out of the room. They quickly left the mansion through the old path, just in time to hear the sound of the office door opening behind them. Outside, Isaiah and Tasha ran quickly, their hearts pounding in their chests. When they finally reached the deserted street safely, both of them sighed in relief. "We did it," Isaiah said, his eyes lighting up even though he was still trembling. Tasha nodded, but she didn't forget to warn, "Don't get too complacent too soon. We need to give this evidence to Simon before she takes action." With the photos in hand, Isaiah and Tasha knew they were one step closer to exposing Amelia's conspiracy. But they also understood that this battle had only just begun. The next morning, Isaiah and Tasha met Simon at a small cafe where they secretly handed over the photos taken from Amelia's mansion. When he saw the captured documents, Simon's expression shifted from astonishment to tension. "This is all I need," he said, his voice low but filled with determination. "Amelia will no longer be able to deny it." Simon decided to confront Amelia right at her mansion. Before leaving, he contacted the police, provided evidence, and requested their presence to assist in case things got out of hand. He also asked Isaiah to participate in the confrontation, not only to serve as a witness, but also to help him understand that it was his own courage that had brought about this turning point. That evening, Simon and Isaiah stepped into Amelia's mansion. The luxurious living room was filled with light from the chandeliers, but the atmosphere was so cold it was suffocating. Amelia sat on the large armchair, her demeanor calm but her eyes clearly showing suspicion when she saw Isaiah with Simon. "Simon, it's quite surprising to see you here at this hour," Amelia said, her tone gentle but laced with an underlying threat. "And who is this boy? A new employee?" Simon did not let her sarcasm distract him. He walked straight to the table, took out the photos that Isaiah and Tasha had taken, and placed them in front of Amelia. "This is all the evidence of your conspiracy," he said, his voice calm yet powerful. "Asset transfers, illegal transactions, and even your manipulation of those around you." She can no longer deny it. Amelia raised an eyebrow, momentarily surprised, but quickly regained her composure. She picked up one of the photos, looking at it with disdain. "So you rely on these things to go against me?" She let out a cold laugh, slamming the photo down on the table. "Who would believe you? A failed businessman and a street child?" Her gaze pierced into Isaiah like a knife, making him shudder slightly. "Don't think you can escape by threatening," Simon replied, his voice unwavering. The police will be here any minute." Hearing this, Amelia gradually lost her composure. Her face twisted in anger. "Simon, do you think you can destroy me?" she shouted, standing up abruptly. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Amelia rushed towards Simon, her anger causing her to lose control. But before she could touch him, Isaiah unexpectedly stepped up, placing himself between the two. Even though his legs were trembling, his eyes were full of determination. "Stop it!" Isaiah shouted loudly, his voice echoing in the tense atmosphere. At that moment, the sound of police sirens echoed outside. The front door burst open and the officers stepped in, guns in hand. "Amelia Johnson, you are under arrest for fraud and conspiracy to commit theft," an officer declared. Amelia, now completely overwhelmed, took a few steps back. She tried to resist, but there was nothing more she could do as the officers handcuffed her. Before being taken away, she turned back to look at Simon and Isaiah, her eyes filled with hatred. "You will regret this," she hissed, but her words now echoed uselessly in a battle she had lost. When the police took Amelia out of the mansion, Simon turned to Isaiah and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Isaiah. If it weren't for you and Tasha, I would never have had the chance to expose her." Isaiah looked at Simon, a mix of relief and pride. "I just did what needed to be done," he replied. But deep down, he knew that this was a major turning point, not just for Simon, but for his own life as well. A few days after Amelia was arrested, Isaiah met Simon again at a familiar cafe. This time, Simon looked healthier and more relaxed, as if a burden had been lifted. He smiled when he saw Isaiah walk in, and the boy could feel the genuine warmth in his eyes. "Isaiah," Simon began, his voice warm, "I don't know how to thank you and Tasha. If it weren't for you two, I might have lost everything. Not just my possessions, but also my faith in humanity." Isaiah smiled faintly, though his eyes still showed signs of confusion. "I'm just doing what I think is right. Simon, you were the only one who believed in me when no one else did." Simon nodded, his eyes full of pride. "I told you that you deserve more than you think. And now, I want to help you have the opportunity to see that. If you want, I can arrange for you to go to school or help you find a stable place to live. This is not a debt I owe, Isaiah. This is the opportunity I want to give you. A new beginning." Isaiah fell silent for a moment. This was the first time someone, besides Tasha, saw him as someone deserving of a better future. Thinking about escaping the days of wandering, starving on the streets made him feel scared, but also full of hope. "Are you sure?" Isaiah asked, his voice almost choked. I'm not sure I deserve that." "You have proven that you are worthy," Simon replied confidently, "not only by helping me, but by never giving up on yourself." From that moment, Isaiah began to change. He no longer viewed life through the lens of suffering and despair. Instead, you began to see potential in yourself, a potential to stand up, to fight for what is right, and to do something meaningful. He thought about the past days, when he and Tasha had overcome so many challenges together, and about Simon, the one who had given him his first trust. Isaiah realized that kindness, no matter how small, could change not only a person's life, but also the way that person perceives the world. He also doesn't forget people like Tasha, those who still have to face difficulties every day. He silently promised that if given the chance, he would return to help those like him, the children forgotten by the world. On the first morning of the new journey, Isaiah stood under the warm sunlight, taking a deep breath. The road ahead is long and full of challenges, but for the first time, he feels that he no longer has to face it alone. You have Simon, a teacher, a friend, and you have faith in yourself. The darkness of the past still lingers, but it has gradually been dispelled by the light of hope. Isaiah walked on, his heart filled with determination and dreams of a different future, a future where he not only exists, but truly lives, and lives with meaning. He knows that his journey has just begun, but he is ready to face whatever awaits. With each step, Isaiah leaves behind the traces of an old life, moving closer to a new life full of hope and opportunity.